Hey guys, it's Chelsea from The Financial Diet, and this week's video is all about MLMs. In 2016, about 20.5 million Americans were participating in an MLM, which is, for those of you keeping score at home, about 6% of the population. That is a huge number of people, so that feeling of being completely overwhelmed by people trying to get you in on these scammy deals is not in your head. It really is happening all around you, especially if you are in an area with a lot of stay-at-home mothers or military spouses. You're even more in the thick of things as far as being targeted. And few things can be more upsetting than one of your own friends or family getting caught up in one of these schemes, which is what we want to talk about today. But before we get into the signs that some scummy MLM is taking over your friend's life, let's talk about what an MLM is for those of you who may be lucky enough not to know. MLM stands for a multi-level marketing scheme, and basically these are organizations in which people are recruited into sales positions where they then recruit other people and they earn commissions on their own sales and the sales of the people underneath them, as well as often a commission or bonus just for recruiting itself. These MLMs are often just pyramid schemes where the people at the top earn a ton of money while most of the people making up the bottom earn nothing or will even go into debt in order to keep up with things like merchandise and inventory requirements. In fact, 99% of people who participate in an MLM will at some point lose money, whether that's just things like an initiation fee or potentially tens of thousands of dollars. These schemes often overwhelmingly target women, specifically people like stay-at-home mothers and military spouses, women who don't have easy access to outside employment or necessarily the time or resources to work at a 9-to-5 job. Chances are you probably know a ton of people who've been suckered into these MLM schemes. But if you had any doubts, we wanted to share with you some of the best ways to recognize that this is happening in the life of someone you love and what you can do to help hopefully get them out. So without further ado, here are 7 signs an MLM is taking over your friend's life. Number 1, they suddenly start posting about a specific brand or product. New MLMers are often encouraged to post heavily on social media, upwards of 3 to 5 times a day, focusing on things like how amazing the opportunity is or the product itself. Often you'll hear about life-changing products or amazing opportunities. And again, if it happens to be women posting this, you'll hear a lot of language about like boss babe, girl boss, self-employed entrepreneur chic, lady, feminist, sprinkle crown. Basically co-opting the language of entrepreneurship and financial success in order to sell a dream. I, for example, had one person from my hometown on my Instagram who suddenly started posting nothing but photos of these pieces of jewelry, and at first I was really confused and then realized after visiting her profile that she had become a rep for this jewelry company that is, you guessed it, a complete MLM, and so that was a delete, delete, delete moment. And it's important to remember that although actually talking about the products themselves are probably going to be a big part of this person who has embraced an MLM, usually they will talk just as much, if not more, about the opportunity, aka becoming a sales rep or consultant, as they're sometimes called. Because keep in mind, what often distinguishes these MLMs is that there's more money to be made in recruiting people than actually selling products. So you're guaranteed to hear just as much about how this is an amazing opportunity as you are about the product or service itself. And they're also posting so often because they likely already spent a ton of money on products that they now need to move. LuLaRoe, for example, requires people to buy a startup kit of $5,000 worth of products and goods that they have to sell, while makeup MLMs will often encourage their sellers to buy demonstration kits, which are often full-priced items of things like mascaras, palettes, etc., easily upwards of $50 to be able to demonstrate the products. This needing to buy inventory up front, and in certain cases not even being able to choose your own inventory, is a huge part of the reason why most people in MLMs will lose money. You're not buying to fit the needs of your customers, you're buying what you're required to buy to stay in the game and then having to sell it afterwards. On average, these sellers are spending about $1,000 to get set up, while a staggering 24% of them will spend between $1,000 and $5,000 setting up. And because many MLMs will have minimum buy requirements to continually stay active, that need to be constantly pushing product that you've already spent money on is something that is endemic to the MLM. The point is, they're not posting because they love the stuff. They're posting because they've already spent money on it and need to sell it. Number 2, They invite you to private groups, Instagram pages, parties, etc. Private Facebook groups have actually become increasingly popular in the MLM world as a sort of replacement for IRL parties like old school Tupperware or makeup parties. They're a place where, like these parties, you're encouraged to bring friends, there's giveaways, discounts, contests, and a sort of networking element. And because a lot of this is, again, about co-opting the language of feminism and empowerment, there'll be things like boss babe groups or, girl bitch power. I don't know what they're called, but you know what I'm talking about. And even more darkly, they might often operate on pretty emotionally manipulative tactics, like needing to raise this money for a specific goal or medical issue even. Things like self-funding their education or trying to save for their kid. And whether online or in real life, many of these sellers will come up with their own branding concepts beyond just the reason why they're trying to earn money, like saving up to pay for their education or a home. They'll also come up with their own name as a seller, their branding, their color palette, their logo. It's all about creating a sales experience that feels more like a group of friends hanging out than it does like a regular store. And combine that with the emotionally manipulative tactics once you're in the door and the co-opting of the empowerment language, and you have a space in which not buying something feels like you're personally hurting that person rather than just like not buying more shit you don't need. That being said, these groups are usually pretty short-lived, with about 50% of participants dropping out within the first year. Turns out, people don't love constantly being harassed on social media and in real life to buy shit. Number 3, every conversation turns into a sales pitch. This is where they really put the direct in direct sales. MLM participants are actively encouraged to start by selling to friends and family because they're the most captive audience who will feel the most socially obligated to support you, especially if, remember, you frame your selling as for a greater cause or even something as urgent as a medical need. And that makes further sense when you consider that most people enter an MLM to begin with through a friend or family member. Just under 50% total of participants say they were initially recruited by a friend or family member. So they know it worked on them. Why not try to do it on someone else? But that need to sell and pitch to people in your inner circle is often cited as a reason why people ultimately leave an MLM, because it can be very, very awkward to do in practice. About 39% of people who left an MLM cited it as a primary reason why. And if you've been lucky enough to never be targeted in one of these conversations that quickly turns into a sales pitch or a recruitment tactic, you can simply check out places like anti-MLM subreddits where people will post screen caps of the messages they receive from people who are literally immediate family members who are now trying to flip them into a bonus for their MLM scheme. Everything from a birthday to an upcoming wedding to something they just happen to notice you posting on your page can be an excuse to start a conversation, which immediately becomes an excuse to sell you on the product or joining the service. And it will come as no surprise that as a result of this aggressive and inner circle targeted tactic, about 16% of MLM participants say that it has negatively impacted their relationships. I know for the people in my own circles who have done this, it has definitely negatively impacted my impression of them. But know that if you've ever received one of those messages that quickly and shadily turns into a pitch, you are not alone. Number 4. They speak in MLM. So let's have a quick vocab lesson, because often it can feel like people participating in these schemes have a language that is entirely their own, and that is intentional. It's a way to legitimize what they're doing and convince newbies that they're a legit company, which they're usually not. The first term to know is downline, because in most MLMs, it's the only real way to ensure you're making money. Basically, a downline is a line of people under you who you have recruited, from whom you earn often bonuses at recruitment, plus commissions on what they sell, and the people they recruit under them. That commission is then passed up the upline, which is the people on top of them who've recruited each other. And because most people who join MLMs will at least make a few sales, even if it's just selling themselves products so they can keep up with inventory, once you start recruiting people in your downline, those commissions are going to start going upline. You may have already been visualizing this in your head, but all of that up and downlining with the commissions is probably starting to resemble a pyramid. And then there's what they call themselves. For example, sellers for LuLaRoe will call themselves consultants, while others are representatives, like with Scentsy. Depending on how many downlines they have, they might call themselves things like mentors or coaches, again, co-opting that empowerment language, or they might be the team head of a group of sellers. Really, it's just a way to make these people sound more legitimate in their roles when all it really means is they've just got a bunch of product sitting in their home somewhere that they're desperate to move. You'll notice that a lot of the language tends to focus on the actual team structure and recruitment. And that's very important to remember, because what distinguishes these MLMs is that they are more focused and more lucrative through recruitment and expanding the team than they are actually moving a quality product. In fact, you'll notice with many of these companies, the actual products themselves are terrible and are constantly fielding things like lawsuits for poor quality, because ultimately the product doesn't really matter. What matters is recruiting more suckers to sell the product. Number 5, they're a vague acquaintance who's suddenly really interested in reconnecting. Because building a big team is such an important part of being in an MLM, there is an enormous pressure to cast a wide net and draw in as many people as possible. So obviously, starting with people who are very close to you and will feel obligated to support you is going to be the first stop. But once you run out of cousins and close friends, you're going to have to start looking a little bit wider, which is why doing something as simple as liking a post that talks about having a great day is enough to get someone to send you a message about this amazing opportunity you would be perfect for. Frankly, if you ever hear the words amazing opportunity or life-changing or entrepreneurial, you should probably just run. So when you start seeing messages pop up from old acquaintances who think you have the perfect attitude to be your own boss, you can feel totally comfortable in deleting that message and even deleting that person from your friends list. We'll link you guys in the description to a fantastic blog from a former Unique rep who now talks about all of the various ways in which her life was taken over by the product and how you can avoid the same. She mentions, of course, those tactics of having to target people in your extended circles once you run out of immediate family members and friends to target, and as you can probably guess, she regrets it. Number 6, they encourage you to buy or try a no-risk starter kit or sample cleanse, etc. It's important to note that MLMers are encouraged to hawk things like starter kits or to encourage people to become a downline, if not even to sell, just to get the products for cheaper, because this is a really easy way to lure people in. But there's no such thing as a no risk when it comes to getting into these schemes. As mentioned earlier, companies like LuLaRoe will require a minimum buy-in of $5,000, and that's for products where you don't even get to control what you're getting and then have to sell afterwards. But even for something as little as $50, these kits are meant to get people on the hamster wheel. And with many MLMers literally not allowed to speak negatively about the potential downsides of these products, it's nearly impossible that in starting up you're going to get a clear picture of the financial realities of getting involved. Downplaying the risks of the initial purchase is extremely crucial to getting new people in the door, because if you were to be made aware of the actual financial risks being assumed by getting started, things like 99% of MLM participants eventually losing money, you would never do it. These startup kits are your first step on the path of needing to dig yourself out. And again, with many of these companies requiring ongoing inventory buys, the idea is to never let you off the hook. And what keeps so many people in these MLMs is what we call the sunk cost fallacy, this idea that you've already put a certain amount of money or time into something like, in this case, having your own business where you're selling the product, so you don't want to stop before you feel like you've actually gotten your money's worth. Well, you've already bought the $5,000 startup kit, so you better keep going until you make money. But for most people, that just means buying more and more product, selling to yourself essentially, where the only people who are actually benefiting are all the people above you. And do keep in mind that these kits, as well as the prizes, benefits, or products that they might be buying at a discount, are subject to taxes. In fact, many people don't understand the extent to which all of these purchases are often taxable events, which can have huge huge repercussions come tax time for these consultants or reps who often don't know how to properly plan and set aside for their taxes, and can be absolutely blindsiding. The details of doing things like managing inventory and knowing what is and isn't considered taxable and setting aside the appropriate amount of money each month to cover those taxes is something that many people do not go into these MLMs understanding. And when you further understand the ways in which these discounts or self-selling can be technically chalked up as wins on paper, you start to understand how MLMs can really misrepresent the success rates of their own participants. You can say that someone has thousands of dollars in sales without following up that they actually were selling to themselves to keep up with inventory requirements, or that $1,000 is actually mostly just counting the discounts that they received from items they otherwise would have paid full price for if they weren't participants. Long story short, this framing of the startups as a no risk, or encouraging people to become members just to get those lucrative discounts, or being shifty with how you represent what is ultimately people just selling to themselves, is how they get you in the door. Don't be lured in. Lastly, number 7 is they are struggling financially while pretending that things have never been better. Only 1/4 of MLM participants ever actually turn a profit during the time they worked for the MLM, and most of those who ever see a profit have to work for 3 to 5 years before that actually happens. And if MLM participants aren't rigorous about tracking all of their expenses, they can easily think they've turned a profit without ever actually doing it. And when you bear in mind that most of these participants have no small business experience, no accounting experience, and no understanding of things like how to prepare, for example, as we mentioned, for things like tax events, or how to keep track of things like money spent on inventory versus money earned, as well as all of the other costs that go into actually maintaining your business, you quickly see why someone can think they're doing well without actually doing well. $25,000 of gross sales in a month, for example, can sound amazing, but when you subtract all of the operating costs and your own time and the shipping and the taxes, and you come out with negative $2,000 at the end of the month, it's suddenly much less impressive. But as I mentioned earlier, many MLMs will actively punish or ostracize people who dare to make negative comments about their experiences, so you're encouraged to hide any financial problems you might be having. You can be drowning in products in your home and only show the new shiny stuff to the people who are following you, and only feel like you can talk about the positive elements of it. MLM participants are also encouraged to go on things like retreats, workshops, which are pitched as like vacations and hangouts, where they often will spend money for attendance because it's another way for the MLM to make money off of them. But these are times to show just the pictures of them having fun with their fellow girl bosses and talking about all of the great things they've been able to do. Basically, the image that they're going to be portraying on social media is one of success and empowerment and financial autonomy. But when you look at the actual numbers, you understand that statistically, it's nearly impossible that this person you're seeing is actually doing well. So much of being in an MLM is creating a sort of smoke and mirrors around your financial reality. And for many people, it involves not super closely tracking the details of your business, so that even you yourself are not aware of the money you might be losing. Understanding that that image of girl boss success is really just that, an image, is so important in understanding why you need to get someone out of this if you can. So now that we've talked about the signs, what do you do? Well, one of the most important things to remember is that these people are often completely isolated within their own organization as far as being able to talk about this stuff. If you post in a Facebook group for the company about a negative experience you might have, you're almost guaranteed to get that post deleted and be yelled at by someone in your upline for stepping out of line. MLMs create the feeling that the other representatives are your friends, and these mentors and coaches above you become kind of a social group. And when you consider how geographically or socially isolated many of the participants are in their day-to-day lives, you see how they feel like they can't talk to anyone in their group about what might be happening. So you have to provide that safe place to go and be honest. As I mentioned before, that sunk cost fallacy of feeling like, well, I've already put in this much, I should just keep going until I can get something out of it, is what will also drag people in. So reminding them that they don't have to keep going and that it's okay to talk about the negatives or it's okay to ask for help is so important to making sure that they feel like they have a lifeline. And it's understandable that they could feel embarrassed for getting suckered into a scam. And in a very sort of cult-like way, many MLM coaches and mentors will tell people in their downline that outsiders will make up lies about the MLM to make it sound worse than it is because they're jealous of your successful girl boss side hustle. So if there is a little bit of initial defensiveness, it's understandable. No one wants to admit, hey, I've been suckered by a pyramid scheme and now I need help getting out and maybe my finances are messed up and half of my friends are just my friends because I'm in their downline. So being patient and understanding that the first pushback to what they're doing may not be responded to very well is part of the game. But especially if this is someone who's very close to you, it's worth continuing down that road to see how much you can gently but firmly at least dislodge them from the cult-like mentality of their MLM. If this is someone who is particularly close to you, like let's say a sibling or a child or a parent or a best friend, you can even go one step further and ask them to do a cash flow statement, which many MLM participants never do. Instead of just looking at their raw sales, looking at it against all of their various expenses, their inventory, their startup costs, their own time. For many participants, that can be a real wake-up call of seeing the cold, hard numbers in a way they've not been encouraged to look at them. And when you go a step further and calculate your hourly wage out of it from whatever meager profits you might be putting out, you're likely to find that you're earning minimum wage or below for something that's taking over your life. But even if you can't get them to go as far as making a cash flow statement or calculating their real wages, at the very least reminding them that they don't have to listen to what their upline says and that they can stop this at any time is incredibly important. Yes, obviously not actually buying any of their products or joining the organization is a first step. And if it's someone you barely know and they're just bothering you, you can delete them. But if this is someone you care about and want to help them, ultimately providing an outside line and perhaps a beacon of sanity in what is becoming an increasingly cult-like life for them is going to be crucial. Be understanding if they get defensive, but remember to be firm and know that what they're doing is actively hurting themselves and the people they're recruiting. This isn't some benevolent project that they've taken on or a side hustle that isn't just panning out. These organizations are predatory, and their entire model depends on putting people who are often already in vulnerable positions into serious financial struggles. Having a friend in an MLM is unfortunately a very common occurrence, but being the kind of person who can help someone in a bad situation get out without shame or judgment isn't so common, but it's something we can all do. And the first step is recognizing when that might be happening to someone in your life. And while yes, it can be fun to go on some of the anti-MLM blogs or subreddits and laugh at some of these ridiculous messages and exploitative practices, these are real people being hurt in real ways. Let's do something about it. So as always, guys, thank you for watching. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and to come back every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday for new and awesome videos. Bye.